A couple of nights back I made the point that it is absolutely unprecedented for the government to deliberately shut down large swathes of the economy. And to be clear, I also made the point that this shutdown is absolutely necessary. In fact, I'd do more in order to save the lives that would certainly be lost if the coronavirus were to take hold here, the way it has in Italy, Spain, France, and is threatening to take hold in Britain. The obvious danger, though, is that in order, quite rightly, to avert a health catastrophe, the government is deliberately inflicting an economic catastrophe on people unless it's got a clear plan to keep them on life support for as long as this policy-induced coma is to last. And this is where the tens of thousands of people flocking to Centrelink and the thousands of people worrying about how their businesses can survive, and the millions and millions of Australians tonight fretting about their economic future as well as the dangers to their health, well, this is where they still need more reassurance and indeed clarity from their governments, both state and federal. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not in the business of criticising the government at a time like this. If they're trying to get it right, and of course they are, I'll be criticising incompetence every night, like the Ruby Princess debacle, because that should never have happened. And I've got an update for you on that a little bit later in the show. But when it comes to leaders grappling with something of this magnitude, something that's global, that's without a vaccine, that's so readily transmitted and risks killing tens of thousands of Australians, well, we've all got to cut our leaders some slack. Inevitably, mistakes will be made, unavoidably. And I have to say, you know, governments in something of this scale will be feeling their way as they go. But still, it's important to have worked out exactly what you're trying to do, where you're trying to end up, and then let people know as clearly as you can what the plan is. The big difficulty at the moment is that while the government obviously has the right idea and is obviously trying to help, its economic measures appear to be disconnected. First, it talked about a stimulus package, and back when they announced it about 2 weeks ago, stimulus might have been the aim. But now what business and workers need is a survival package. Back then, it talked about helping businesses to trade through this crisis, when actually, because it has to save lives, it's forced to shut businesses down, shut their trade down, not help them trade through. And yes, there are now double-sized dole payments and $50,000 small business grants, but do we really want to turn everyone in this country into a welfare recipient for workers to leave their jobs in the middle of a crisis rather than be carried through the crisis? Because to me, rather than Centrelink pay out the money, I'd rather see government support businesses to pay workers their own salaries, because that means three things. It means that workers get the money today and tomorrow that they had yesterday, so their current expenses like mortgages and raising their families can be met properly. It also means there's incentive for businesses not to offload their workers either and send them off to Centrelink. 2, it keeps workers attached to their workplaces. It gives them hope that once all of this passes, as it will, they'll have a real job to go back to, not just a promise of one. And 3, this is what's happening overseas. It makes sense. And at a time when people are worried about having to fight for their lives, the last thing we want to do is load them up with the mental anguish of financial burdens as well. The government keeps saying that extraordinary times demand extraordinary measures, and they're right. But that means this has got to be reconsidered. I know it's not easy to work this out. I know how the government payment systems work better than most. But why not use Centrelink now for the emergency support over the next month or so, and use that time across the tax office and the other departments to start paying people properly via their current employers their proper pay? After all, every business in this country deals with the ATO all the time. And with a full court press here from the public service, state public servants, federal public servants, those in departments that aren't particularly busy while this is a health and economic crisis, well, they should all be made to work on this, because it's not beyond everyone's wit in Canberra to sort this out. This could and should go on, these payments, from employers to employees for as long as the corona lockdown is to last. And if the government was to be uberly economic responsible, I suppose, they could also make these payments indefinite kinds of HEX scheme loans, sort of loans we give students, uni students. We'll give those sorts of loans to businesses. One way or another, it's up to the government here to ensure that when this is all over, as it will be it 2 months, 6 months, possibly a year, that Australia has an economy to go back to, because unless something changes, right now, forecasters are telling us today there'll be an extra 1 million Australians unemployed. And really, is that the best we can do? If this really was a war, as the PM says, let's treat it like a war and spend whatever we have to win it. If this was a normal war, the government ordered back then businesses to make tanks and planes to protect the country. Well, back then, like we would now, we'd pay them to do that. Well, given this is a war against disease and the government is ordering businesses to shut down overnight to protect the country, it has to pay them. Otherwise, it's destroying them, or many of them at least, and with it, our economy.